Hi guys, and welcome to this third video on Cloudy Dynamic Support and Resistance. In this video I'm going to talk about the settings that you can mess with to properly set up the indicator to suit your personal analysis and chart and asset. So yeah, as you can see on my chart right now, we do have Ethereum here on the 15-minute. This is cloudy, as you can see. You have the resistance clouds. Sometimes they are quite strong here in purple and red. You can see there's strong resistance up here, smashing price down into the support range. Here you can see we have scattered support down here, but it's for this uptrend, this seems to be enough to make price bounce into resistance. And here on this tiny pullback, you can see that price has to retreat a little bit further than before because it got rejected by this strong resistance. It takes some time for this support to gather around here and make give proper support to price so that price can bounce higher here and attack resistance again. So this is how Cloudy normally works. As you can see, if I go back, you can see that it is doing the same things over and over again. It takes a while to load. This is normal. So here you can see pretty well that these mechanics I just described are repeating themselves over and over again. Sometimes when you have a very volatile trading range and you're looking at a low time frame chart, for example, you can see that dynamic support and resistance is almost ignored, simply because the volatility, trend, strength, momentum, and yeah, the emotions in the market are too strong for low time frame support and resistance to actually have an effect help price or contribute to more stable price action. This is not happening here, as you can see, because the market was too emotional. But once you have a pretty stable trading range established, dynamic support and resistance becomes reinforced. Over time, it is becoming more and more reinforced, stronger and brighter, and you see the color change, for example, yellow and teal colored clouds or purple and red colored resistance clouds. This is a normal process, and these are the ranges that can be traded very well with Cloudy. And if you're looking at this kind of price action, I would suggest to zoom out and use Cloudy on a much higher time frame. Then it is possible to see dynamic support down here, but don't look at low time frame clouds when you're seeing high time frame volatility. This doesn't make sense because price simply ignores support and resistance here. It's just it's just violently killing all the traders in this area. So yeah, you have to zoom out and to adjust the settings. And this is what we are going to do in this session, and to see how we can set up Cloudy for as many different situations as possible. We're going to look at Ethereum, at Bitcoin, maybe at other assets as well, as different time frames. And I will show you what each of the settings actually does and how it works. But I have to add that this is just the early access version of Cloudy, and there might be changes to the settings. So it could be that in the release version or in future updates, there will be new settings available or changed settings. It's not yet finalized, so there might be some changes in the future. But if this happens and something new is being added to the indicator, I'm going to explain this stuff as well. Okay, let's have a look at the settings on this indicator. First of all, what you can see when you click on the settings icon up here, you can see below inputs, you have version information. So if you're unsure which version you are on, you can see that, which one you're using. This is important because if you set up a chart with this indicator and I deploy an update to TradingView, it is not automatically updated on your chart because you might want to have the same settings as before. So you will probably continue to use the old version until you proactively reapply the indicator to your chart. This is something that I've noticed is happening. So yeah, here you can double check if you're on the newest version. The general settings is, in this case, you can define a chart, a ticker, like this. You use the exchange name, and after this, you're putting in the ticker of the asset pair you're looking at or you want to look at, and this is how you can access a chart or data from a chart. But in most cases, it is sufficient to use current chart. This automatically fetches the data from the chart you're on. So this ticker is just interesting to you when you want to fetch data from a different chart and import it to another one. So for example, if I'm on the Ethereum USDT perp chart here, and I want to fetch the data from ETH USD from Coinbase, I can do this, and it displays Cloudy based on the Coinbase data on the Binance chart, for example. So this is something that you can do, but it is not necessary in most cases. The display settings, they tell you or that you can choose what you want to see with this indicator. You can just make Cloudy display support, resistance, or both. In this case, I have both. If I use just support, you will see that the resistance disappears and just the support remains. This is very useful in times of strong trends. For example, if you see a very strong trend to the upside, in which resistance becomes unreliable, you can focus on support, because this is much more interesting in this case. You probably want to enter longs along the trend, along the uptrend. So the support clouds are more interesting than the resistance clouds in this case. You can make the chart a little bit easier to read this way. But for now, I keep it on both. I'm letting it reload real quick. And okay, so then we have Cloudy settings. There's an option for presets. There's nothing in there yet, but when Cloudy has been released and there's some data coming in on what kind of settings work best for which asset and timeframes, I will going to keep adding presets to this indicator and update this indicator with new presets you can use and apply. So the entire community benefits from your input as well. So if you find nice settings for a specific asset on a specific time frame, and you want to share your settings with the community, just post them to Discord, and I'm going to add them to the presets if they are good. This way we can all benefit from each other. The Bollinger Band BB mode is Bollinger Band mode, and you can choose between two different kinds of Bollinger Bands. The traditional Bollinger Bands, these are the equivalent to, these are the same as the standard indicator, Bollinger Bands, the built-in indicator, or you can use the Fibonacci Bollinger Bands. These are a specific kind of Bollinger Bands, and if you type in Fibonacci Bollinger Bands, there is a public indicator made by Rashad with 25k likes, and this is the indicator that tells you more and gives you more insights about what Fibonacci Bollinger Bands are. And Cloudy is made to use these kind of Bollinger Bands as well, so you can actually switch between both types of Bollinger Bands. I'm going to explain the difference between Bollinger Bands and Fibonacci Bollinger Bands a little later. This is a session, this is a topic that should be dealt with in a separate session, not in this one, because it's a little bit more complex and you need to know the TA basics that are necessary to grasp the concept of Fibonacci Bollinger Bands. But in essence, both are similar. If I change them right now, you can see it takes a while to load, but the bands will just slightly change their alignment and trajectories. Let's have a look. There it is. As you can see, the clouds have changed a little bit, not too much, so there's not too big of a difference. However, they are different, and there's meaning to this difference that I'm going to explain later. But if you're completely new to dynamic support and resistance and Bollinger Bands, I would suggest you keep using the traditional Bollinger Bands like this. Okay, so the third option you have here is the time frame mode, and this is a very important thing to set up. You can choose between formula and fixed time frames. So the main ingredient of Cloudy's output is time, and with formula, Cloudy calculates its own time frames to look at. So this means that Cloud, instead of looking at, for example, the 15-minute chart, the 30-minute chart, the 45-minute chart, and so on, it is using a formula to determine the time frames it is looking at. For example, it could be something like 15 minutes, 23 minutes, 36 minutes, 48 minutes, and so on. It could be something really strange, but it makes sense because it follows a mathematic formula. And this is to ensure that the time frame composition makes sense from a meta-analytic perspective. For example, the distance between the time frames needs to follow some pattern. It doesn't make sense to look at 15-minute, 4-hour, and 1-week charts at the same time because they're completely different, and the gap between 15 minutes and 4 hours is not that big, but the gap between 4 hours and 1 week is huge. So it doesn't really make sense to look at clouds generated by putting in this data. So the formula ensures that the composition will always make sense, but the downside is you have to set this up. You have to come up with the proper parameters and variables to make this formula very effective. On the other hand, what you also can do is to choose fixed time frames. And when you do this, segment here with fixed time frames becomes relevant. You can choose up to 6 different time frames, going from the lowest time frame to the highest time frame down here. And you can choose them by yourself. For example, if I'm on the 15-minute chart and I want to look at higher time frame supported resistance, so I'm going to start with 2 hours. Then I'm simply laddering this up, 6, 8, and 10 hours. And I'm letting Cloudy work with that. So you will see that the dynamic support and resistance becomes less volatile. And yeah, it's looking at a broader picture here. So here it is. As you can see, the clouds have become a lot thinner. They are far away from each other. But they also become more reliable. And this is very important because they are looking at higher time frame data. So the higher time frame movements should, in theory, respect this support and resistance much more than it would do with lower time frame clouds. But as you can see, there is something strange with the clouds displayed over here. It doesn't look too good right now. So now we have to also mess with the other settings to make this a little bit easier to read. So if you have this kind of setup here, you can now look at, for example, the support clouds, which are not beautiful here. They are kind of strange. So you can increase the tolerance, for example. The tolerance means this is the area that is being scanned by the algorithm to find matching Bollinger Band clusters. So to find support and resistance, Cloudy is scanning for clusters of Bollinger Bands. And these clusters are grouped together and joined to an area of support and resistance. And the borders of this area are what is displayed here. For example, these lines, what I call clouds, because they were filled with color before, but now they are not anymore because of visual bugs. These are the borders of support and resistance areas that are made of clusters of Bollinger Bands. So if you want to increase the scan distance, the tolerance around Bollinger Bands, that triggers a signal that there is a band that wants to be included in the group, then you want to increase this. And the standard for low time frame is 0.45%. Now we're using medium time frame data from 2 hour to 10 hours, so we want to increase this. And I'm going to choose 1.5% for this, for the support only. And we are going to see that the clouds become a little bigger and more consistent. There it is. So you can see the range become much broader. Now you have actual clouds down here, some streams of support and resistance. So you can mess with these settings and find good values to represent the support and resistance on your chart. The downside by increasing the tolerance is that the support and resistance becomes less precise. So there's a larger area to look at. It's not that easy to place stop losses anymore, so you have to be careful. Don't choose too high values for tolerance. Keep them as low as possible, but as high as needed in order to display the support and resistance in a proper way that doesn't look totally messed up. So you have to play around with this. There's no right or wrong. I'm going to reset this to 0.45, and yeah, this is a way how you can use the fixed time frames, and you can also have broader gaps. For example, you can choose 60 minutes, then 3 hours, 6 hours, and so on. This will lead to completely different results on Cloudy, and you will have to find out what works best. A lot of these features are new, so I don't know myself how well they are going to work with certain assets and timeframes. So it will take some time to find out what works really well and what does not. But if you want to have the easy mode, you can just use a formula, and the timeframes will be calculated based on the settings down here. But let's talk first about the basic Bollinger Band settings. You have two options here. First one is the support and resistance offset length. And what this does, I will show you. Let me put this to 50. And you will see that the clouds change their appearance drastically. Like this. So what you achieve by adjusting the support and resistance offset length is, I have a tiny tooltip here, offset length that is used in the formula. So it's based on this time frame formula. And what this does is to offset the Bollinger Band length. For example, a standard Bollinger Band has a length of 20. And here is the actual length that you choose for the Bollinger Bands. It is 20 as a default value. And by choosing an offset of 50, it is actually starting at 70 and proceeding at steps of 20, because it's the increment. So it's starting at 50 and then goes to 70. It starts at 70 because 50 plus 20. Then it goes to 90, 110, 130, and so on. So what you achieve by this is that low length Bollinger Bands are not included in the analysis. And the result on your chart is that the highly volatile bands don't appear and are not included in finding support resistance areas. And this means if you look at the clouds with no offset, they are super volatile and they follow price very diligently. Takes a while. Here you can see that the clouds are always wrapped around price action to some degree, and they are trying to follow price action fast. In most cases, this is actually useful to find scalp trade setups, for example. But if you're more of a swing trader, for example, you would want to use an offset so that the volatility doesn't really play a role, and you see the boundaries of the trading range more, because the higher time frame Bollinger Bands are now being used to determine where the support and resistance areas are, and now you can see where the range highs and lows are more properly. And this is a good way to adapt Cloudy to your trading style. So if you're more of a scalper, you would want to use fast-paced and volatile clouds. And if you're more of a swing trader, you might want to use a larger offset or a higher increment, for example. In addition to this, you can also mess with the increment and set this to like 30. And if you do this, the bands are, there's a higher gap between the single bands. This means that everything gets blurred out a bit. It's kind of smoothed out here, as you can see. So it gets a little bit smoother, cleaner, a little bit more reliable as well. You can achieve pretty nice looks and very nice trading ranges this way. Or you can also decrease the increment, in example, to 10. And then you will have the Bollinger Bands starting at 60, going over 70, 80, 90, 100, and so on. So they are very close to each other, but still they're starting late with a higher length. And this leads to some very interesting effect on the trading ranges like this one. They are kind of adaptable and very clean, but they're not super volatile. So you can come up with all sorts of combinations, setup combinations here in order to find your perfect trading range and the perfect support and resistance that you want to look at. So you can just try out messing with these settings. There's nothing wrong by doing this. Okay, then we have the support settings and we have the resistance settings. Both are the same, just for the they are separate from each other. So you can actually have different support clouds than resistance clouds with different settings. For example, you can have long-term supports clouds, while at the same time you have short-term resistance clouds being displayed on your chart. This is a possibility. And first of all, the tolerance, I already explained what it does. The standard deviation factor is the same as in traditional Bollinger Bands. You have the Bollinger Bands are made of standard deviations, and these are multiplied with a factor, and this is what it is multiplied by. So 2.5 is a very common value to use for Bollinger Bands. You can use 2 to have very narrow bands, for example. Let me show you this. Going to... they will now come a little bit closer to price action because the deviation is not as big anymore. This has the downside that they might be pierced more often and broken more often, but they are also hit more often. So you have to find a good balance between support and resistance that is being actually hit, so that you can actually enter trades there and exit trades there, and support and resistance that is reliable, that is not broken and not violated too much. So this is the 2 value of 2, and let's have a look at 3. So you can, if you change the standard deviation, I would suggest you look at what happens in trends. This is rather sideways here, so it is not very good reference material, but looking at this trend, for example, it becomes more clear if this setting actually makes sense. And in this case, it does make sense. As you can see, price is bouncing from the clouds. This is a good sign. So we have 3 hits over here that make sense. It's not breaking out of the range here either, so this is actually a pretty good setting for this kind of volatility. It's also pretty good to trade this kind of range, for example. So a value of 3 is certainly not that bad. I prefer to use 2.5 though, because it's perfect balance between reliability and it's the perfect center of everything. And a lot of people are using a value of 2 for Bollinger Bands. A lot of people are using a value of 3. So 2.5 kind of makes the average of what most people use as settings. Okay, so we have the support resistance origin time frame, and this is a very important setting as well. It is only, you need to set this up if you disable the use current resolution. By default, Cloudy fetches data from the current chart you're on. So if you're on a 15-minute chart, it uses 15-minute resolution to look at the Bollinger Bands here. But if you want to fetch data from higher time frames, you can also choose an origin time frame. You can theoretically achieve the same by increasing the length. For example, if you have a length of 20 on 15 minutes and you want to go to 1 hour, you just have to multiply the length by 4. So if you have a length of 20 on if you have a length of 20, no, other way around. If you want to have 1 hour Bollinger Bands on your 15-minute chart, you need to divide the length you want to have, for example, 20, by, no, sorry, I'm talking bullshit right now. It can become quite complicated sometimes. So the time frame conversion thing isn't easy. So no, of course, if you want to have 1 hour Bollinger Bands on your 15-minute chart, you want to have 15-minute Bollinger Bands with 4 times the length so that it matches the 1 hour length of 20. So you have actually a length of 80 on your 15-minute chart because it is 15 minutes is 4 times in that 1 hour. I hope this makes sense, but it can become quite complicated sometimes. So you can increase the length offset and length increment, for example, and it will have the same effect as increasing this, but it is easier. You don't have to calculate all this stuff by yourself. You can simply choose which kind of time frame you want. For example, you know that the 8-hour Bollinger Bands are pretty cool for support, and you want to have them displayed on your chart with a tolerance of 2.5. And a length increment of 15. Cloudy is going to display the 8-hour support, dynamic support based on these Bollinger Bands with the settings. Takes a while. Here you go. It is almost not visible because we are in a 15-minute chart and we have 8-hour support. Of course, this doesn't really make sense. You could go to a higher time frame chart directly, but this is just to show you what it does. If I were go to the 8-hour chart now, you will see that the picture will be a little bit different, because you have the 8-hour support areas. It makes sense now looking at the 8-hour chart, but looking at this on the 15-minute chart doesn't really make sense. But this setting is meant to, for example, let me give you a better example. Instead of choosing 8-hour, let me choose 45 minutes. This makes much more sense. So you have 15-minute data on resistance, and you have 45-minute data on the support. So you will see a visible difference between support and resistance now. Here you go. It looks completely different. And as you can see, these are huge. The support clouds are huge. So you want to decrease the tolerance a bit, maybe to 1.5. Whenever you get something like this, you want to decrease the tolerance. Here you go. It looks a little bit better, but still not perfect. You see standard deviation. You can even use 30 minutes. So this is double the length of the 15-minute clouds over here. I didn't see any difference now. 45. Oh, yes. Okay. Very subtle changes here. Okay. Here you can see these are the 30-minute areas. Maybe decreasing the tolerance makes sense. So you have to approach the perfect settings by trial and error. Doing trial and error. It's probably the only way, because there is no real guidelines. There are no guidelines on how to use this, how to come up with the perfect settings. It is different for each asset, but once you get a really cool setup, it will probably remain reliable for a long while. And in certain situations, you will be able to trade this with consistent reliability. This is the big advantage. So as you can see, this makes more sense. You have these tiny, more volatile resistance clouds because they're based on the 15-minute chart. You have these broad, more stable, consistent 30-minute clouds now at the support. This is how you can customize your timeframes here. You can even use a timeframe stretch factor. And what this does is it actually expands the timeframes that are used in the analysis. So, for example, if you have an increment, an absolute increment of 15, it always adds 15 to your current time frame. So if you have 15 minutes and you have a length, you have a standard length, default length of 20, and you have an increment of 15, it will add 15 and you will come up with 35. Then it will 15 again and you will have 50. And then it will add 15 once again and you will have 65. So there's a linear progression on this. But if you want to have an exponential progression, you need to use the time frame stretch factor. It adds a factor into the equation and it multiplies the increment with, for example, 20%. If I choose 1.2, and you will see that, well, let's do it a little bit more noticeable by choosing 2. And now the bands will expand from the length of the bands will become, yeah, it will be not that less narrow. So you will have bands that are more diverse in terms of time frames. And the result is, as you can see, they will become smoother, more stable, and yeah, they will actually look pretty unique. You can even make this some kind of support stream. It's really interesting what you can come up with by messing with these settings. I mean, as I said, this is highly experimental, so you can try whatever comes to mind, and you will probably find very, very cool things, cool setups, and presets that will work very well. Of course, you will also find a lot of setting combinations that won't work very well. This is normal, but yeah, just try it out yourself. So yeah, these are the same as you can do the same for resistance, and you can customize the time frames on these one. The tolerance is a very important value. You have to get used to this. And if you're a beginner to everything, I would recommend not using the offset. I would just leave the length increment at 10, 15, or 20 maybe. These are pretty good values. The tolerance needs to be adjusted if you're zooming out. For example, if I zoom out to the 4-hour chart. And now, because I have use current resolution on and use current chart, I don't need to do anything now because the chart itself adapts, or Cloudy adapts to the 4-hour chart. However, as you can see, the clouds become thinner and invisible partly. So because the tolerance can't keep up with the distance of the Bollinger Bands. On the 4-hour chart, the distance in percent is much greater, so you need a higher tolerance to actually group them together. This is what we are going to do by increasing the tolerance, and the outcome is that the clouds will appear again. But you have to be careful. The values should give you clouds that you can see and trade, but they should not make them super large and price should not start trading within these clouds. This is not what we want to see. For example, if I would change the tolerance to 5, you will see what I mean. There are clear signs you can identify to see that the settings are not like they are supposed to be. For example, in this case, when support clouds and resistance clouds are almost overlapping here, this sometimes happens in pressure zones, but in this case, it's certainly not good because we are this is a 25% range. You don't want to see clouds overlapping in a 25% range. That doesn't make sense. So you would want to decrease the tolerance here. As you can see, there's if you see these large background, these gaps between, as I said, these are borders of the areas. So you have lower borders and higher borders, and as you can see, there is a gap between those, and this means this is the core zone of the support, and we don't want this to be very big. We want to have the areas, the borders, the upper borders and the lower borders very close together. For example, like, yeah, this is like in this case, for example, you have a clear area of resistance over here, but in this case you have too large of gaps, and whenever you see this happen like this, it's time to reduce the tolerance. So I'm going back to 2. And it will make more sense again. Here we go. If you see something like this, is perfect. This is a very neat dynamic resistance structure we have here, like this one. This is perfect. This is a sign that these settings are pretty good, and as you can see, they are also reliable. This was a very sharp parabolic uptrend here we had on this bull run in Ethereum. Of course, even red resistance is not enough to withstand the momentum of this trend. This is completely fine, but as you can see, price didn't manage to get above this resistance, so it's actually still a very good indicator to tell you where the current top can be. Sure, it could have gone above this at some point, even stronger, but as you can see, it didn't happen with these settings. It didn't happen here. It did happen here with this explosion, but these are very rare moves. Yeah. Okay, so this is a quick explanation of the different settings you have on Cloudy at the moment. As I said, there is a possibility there will be additional settings, but if this happens, I will explain them in another video. If you have any questions, so first of all, if you have questions around the settings, use our Discord channel, Cloudy Early Access, to discuss this and to ask your questions. So hopefully everyone who has access to Cloudy has access to this channel as well. The second thing is, if you find settings that are really that are worthy to become a preset, in your opinion, let me know. Share them with the group, and I will have a look and see if it makes sense to add this as a preset for everyone. So we can start with some very nice presets. A preset could look like something, for example, Ethereum 4-hour scalping, or Bitcoin 12-hour swing trading. This could be a preset, but you can also scrap the asset and just say 5-minute high range resistance, whatever comes to mind. I don't know what you will come up with, but there are a lot of possibilities to make this a really useful tool with very diverse presets. And yeah, if you find some, let me know. Yeah, this is it, and see you in the next video. There will be more videos on Cloudy. I will also share some ideas on how to find certain setups. I will explain a little more about the detailed mechanics. For example, something like this, how to handle something like this when it becomes very unreliable to look at Cloudy because the range is broken. How do we read this? How do we trade this? Do we trade this at all? All these kind of questions, I will answer them in the next videos. It will take some time to explain all this stuff. But let me tell you one thing. I've been trading with Cloudy for years, and I've been making a lot of money with Cloudy. So it actually works. You just have to know how. And I want to share this know-how so that you will be able to make money with this indicator. it takes a while. You have to learn certain things and you have to get used to it and you have to train. You have to practice with this indicator. It is not a signal-based indicator. And the thing is, people, and especially beginners, like signal-based indicators more because they get a signal and they are told what to do. You don't have to think anymore and you just do what the indicator tells you to do. But let me tell you this is the worst kind of trading. You don't learn anything. You are completely dependent on the indicator that it does the right thing and tells you the right thing. You don't have any control whatsoever. You don't become smarter. You don't become more experienced. And in most cases, you will lose money because signal-based indicators, most of them are bullshit. So you need to be very lucky to find one that actually works consistently. And most don't. They work for a period of time and then they stop working because the market circumstances change. Cloudy is an indicator that is adapting to market circumstances, so it doesn't have this problem. But on the other hand, you will have to apply your TA knowledge and you will have to learn. And I'm of the firm belief that there is no becoming successful in markets without putting in effort and using your brain and your knowledge and your experience. Sure, you can have luck at times, but this is not the definition of success. You want to have consistent success. You want to have the ability to make money all the time, whenever you want, and not just in certain periods of time and by using a certain tool that you don't understand. So Cloudy is an approach to, on the one hand, give you the ability to trade a concept that is rarely described in TA because it is too complex for most to understand. On the other hand, it makes you learn more about the markets and how markets work. By watching Cloudy, you will understand price action in a different way, and you will start to understand why certain moves happen. Cloudy tells you a lot of things if you watch it, and it becomes really, really interesting after a while, watching different time frames with Cloudy and what happens there and why is price grinding into red resistance all of a sudden, and you realize what the difference is. The emotions, for example, and how a trend actually reverts back to sideways. Like, look at this. You have this crash and then high volatility, and now price is stabilizing, and a trading range is forming. And Cloudy tells you this, that there's a trading range being established here, and you can see this happening. It's visualized. It's a super cool thing to look at charts with Cloudy on it. So I can only recommend you investing your time into this because it's certainly worth it. Yeah, I wanted to look at a different asset. Let's look at something completely different, maybe. Gold. I didn't look at it before. Let's see what Cloudy tells us about gold. Yeah, let's... this doesn't matter because we have used current resolution, so it actually is... It's okay, so this is, as you can see, the first thing we do when we see something like this is to decrease the tolerance. Let's put it to half. Cloudy is made to work with all assets. There's no exception, because this concept of dynamic support and resistance applies to all assets, except low volume markets. This is very important to understand. Markets, like some shitcoin markets that don't move much or move like 100 or 200% a day, these TA doesn't apply to these markets in most cases, because the single players have too much control over price action. So it doesn't make sense looking at this from a TA perspective. But all decent markets with a certain minimum volume, these things work very well. So the reason why we have to decrease the tolerance on gold is because the volatility is not comparable to crypto. We have like 15% on a 2 to 3 month horizon. It's completely different to crypto, where you have 15% moves in a day or more. But as you can see, by decreasing the tolerance, we can adjust Cloudy to work very well with gold as well. Here you can see we have a new trading range here. The support settings are not really good here, but they are starting to look somewhat decent. The pressure zones look pretty good, as you can see. We have price bouncing between these zones. This is very nice trading opportunity. If you have a sideways market like this here, you can just long support in short resistance and just let it go. You see when we break out, you notice. This is the good thing about this. Let me decrease the tolerance a little bit again. We have the time stretch factor here in this, so this might be a reason why the clouds look differently. Yeah, but as you can see, it's starting to look good, and you probably have to mess with the settings for a while to find really cool setups. But here you can see it's starting to become really cool. With this resistance, this support, you have this pressure zone. Very beautiful, this breakout. You know downtrend will occur. We find support again on the clouds, bounce into resistance, grind, retrace, another pressure zone, breakout, into very strong support, rally up, even through strong resistance here. But this means it's overheated, crash. So you can actually start to read these charts from very easily. If you understand the cloudy mechanics, this becomes really nice, even on gold. Let's look at something completely different. Again, maybe a stock, Tesla. CBOE. Let's look at the volatility. Oh, okay, this is huge. Yep. So in this case, we actually have to increase the tolerance. Because the volatility is much higher than gold. And here we go. Not perfect, but it's getting there. Let's increase it a little bit more. Okay, so here you can see we have the resistance range. We're entering the resistance range, retracing, and then coming back down to the support. But you see this weakness over here and this close into support. This is a warning sign. And you see this parabolic shape, which tells you we are going down. We are going down, finding support here, bouncing, nice, into resistance, retracement. It's always the same. It's the same what we just pointed out on gold. This is a sideways market. This is the main support zone. We see bounces here. Resistance is starting here, becoming very strong. So this approach will probably fail. Failed, approached again, retraced. And then we had this super pump over here. This was a breakout move. These happen. You can't do anything about this. Yeah, very nice on this downtrend. We have this resistance range into support, bounce. Okay, the settings are not perfect to catch this resistance stream, but as you can see here, for example, and here, you could have seen the resistance in advance. And the support bounces also make sense. And here you have the warning sign down and trend initiated. As this one could have led to a bounce, but it did not. You see this came down here, another warning sign. So you can actually see these things. You can manage your risk very well, even on stocks. Very nice range over here, warning sign over here. You could even use this as breakout for breakout trades, but I'm not using it for breakout trades. I'm only using it for high reliability trades. You have a sideways resistance, and you have weak bounces into this resistance. It's a higher 90% chance that we will retrace from there. So you can get a scalp in or even a swing trade on these time frames. Yeah. So works on precious metals, it works on stocks, it works on crypto, on altcoins. You can use, of course, it is optimized for Bitcoin. Everything I do in terms of indicator development is optimized for the Bitcoin market because this is what I'm primarily trading, Bitcoin. So you will get the best results with a king. Here you can see. So even on this decline, you know exactly when this is over at this point because you can see that the upper support is not broken here anymore. So this tells you we will probably enter at least a dead cat bounce, if not a sideways range. And this is what happens. And if you're in a sideways range, you know what to look at. Warning sign here. It goes lower, bounces, finds support on top of the support clouds, goes higher into resistance. Guess what will happen here? It will probably retrace. And then you can start applying, because you don't have any clouds here, you can start applying your knowledge on TA, on price action, see the swing high and lows, you know where it wants to retrace to, maybe goes up. You will see how the clouds react. If they expand, good sign that we will go up further. If they become stronger, you see purple and red here, sideways, it will probably go down from here. It is very easy to read Cloudy at some point, but it takes some time. But once you're there, it's easy, and it's a real skill to have, because you understand price action much better. All that Cloudy does is tell you a little bit about future price action. And it helps you in actually understanding why price is doing the things it's doing. And when you understand this, it's the recipe for success. But of course, top priority is risk management. You always need to know when not to trade, when to trade. In this case, for example, do we short this? Do we short this? It's possible, but it's risky. You have to know that it is risky because we have just made another higher low. We are breaking this high. If we break this high, bulls have initiated a new uptrend here. It will probably go higher. So sure, it could retrace, but a short here in this region would then mean it is from a risk management perspective, much better to make this a quick scalp than to make this a swing trade to the lows, because it doesn't make sense. We are just initiating a new uptrend if we break this high. So this is what you have to know. And you can use this knowledge in addition to Cloudy, and you will come up with very nice setups with good risk reward. And you also know when not to trade. For example, in this case, after this candle, there's nothing to trade here. You don't have support. Resistance is somewhere up here. The range is broken. It could bounce here, but there's no support giving you any idea of that happening. Then you could look at price action support, and yes, sure, could bounce, could make a higher low, and go higher from here. So yeah, but this is not a situation I would like to trade based on Cloudy. Of course, you could trade this based on a breakout perspective, but based on Cloudy, there's nothing to trade here. Is there something to trade here? We have a very strong uptrend. Resistance is very strong, but it is being violated. So the trend is still strong. We see tiny rejections, but nothing serious yet. Nothing to trade here. Just wait it out. See a spike into resistance, red resistance forming, rejection, another rejection, and this is the point where you could say, okay, this is over. This trend has just reversed. And yeah, you wait until it reaches support again, see how it reacts here, if it finds support or not. And then you see resistance is coming down. Pressure zone is coming. You will probably expect chop. Up, down, up, down. So these are the trading opportunities here are much better. And if you feel like your settings are not good enough to give you the proper setups, just change them. Try different ones. Try different time frames. Another important thing to know with Cloudy is if you use it with the very high time frames, for example, the weekly. Let me go to the Bitstamp chart. If you're using it with a very high time frame, it will become less reliable because macro trends operate on different concepts than dynamic support and resistance. Sure, you could see some confluence, but it is not meant macro trends are not really abiding by the rules of dynamic support and resistance. They are driven by trend primarily. So let me show you something when I increase the tolerance to 8. So this is using weekly data now. Here we go. So what you see on this chart right now is in a bull run like this, the trend decides. So you have super strong resistance, but apparently the trend isn't really impressed. It's just it's just going. You know, the big variables are playing into this. It's not about dynamic support and resistance at this point. It's about a halving and bull run and cycles and this kind of thing. So this concept doesn't play that much of a role anymore. In this case, when we have a sideways market, however, it becomes more reliable. When the trend is not as strong, you can see there is this layer of resistance here. And it shows you why price actually had issues entering a bull market here, because it met with this very strong dynamic resistance and even had this resistance over here. But then the cycle dictates that we will go up. And we had the lock trend running through. So this was pushing price up against resistance, and the squeeze was this move. So here you can see how these things work on the higher time frames. It's much more difficult to trade based on higher time frames than on medium and lower time frames. Keep this in mind when using Cloudy. It's not optimized to offer you perfect swing trade opportunities or investment opportunities in for entire cycles or something like this. So I would recommend to stick to a few hours, a few minutes. To my own experience, I think that charts between 10 minutes and 8 hours are best to use. Okay, let's look at the daily chart with a tolerance of 2. Daily chart will work much better than weekly chart. Here you can see already this pressure zone, this triangle. So on the daily chart, you see that you can clearly see the support and resistance areas. You can see why price is simply grinding sideways. It makes absolute sense here, total sense. You see why it is breaking out, because this is a pressure zone. It's running into resistance, finding resistance at the lower end of the resistance range here, trying to stay up on this weak support. It's showing weakness, getting rejected, warning sign, we go lower, and then you can see we are entering another sideways trend. So whenever price is in pressure zones and it's going sideways, you can use Cloudy very effectively, even on the daily chart. This is also more of a sideways trend. You can see prices grinding into this, getting rejected, approaching, getting rejected, approaching, getting rejected. And with the right settings, you would have this run like this. So you would have caught this one as well. Yeah, and now you see there is some support joining up here, but it takes time because all the support was down there. It's taking its time to get back up here. Resistance is at some point will turn down, and bulls will have to break this, or it will enter a pressure zone here with support and resistance and go higher or lower. Yeah, or it will go lower from here and meet more support down here, and you will see the clouds forming. So all these things could happen. So yeah, have a look at this yourself. There's a lot to discover, and it's certainly fun learning price action, or more about price action this way. This was very interesting to watch, by the way, this pressure zone. I made a TradingView article here explaining why we will break out. It's based on this data, but I didn't have Cloudy back then. I just had Fibonacci Bollinger Bands, but they are showing you the same thing. So yeah, this was very obvious. And this kind of thing was also very obvious. Yeah, Cloudy helps in many ways. Find out for yourself and have fun. And see you in the next video. Bye-bye.